I walked up to my apartment door after another exhausting day debugging code at the office, only to find it unlocked again. My heart sank as I pushed it open and heard the familiar sound of my mother Helen rearranging my kitchen cabinets, while my father Richard sat comfortably on my couch, reading through my mail like it was the morning newspaper. This was the fourth time this month they had used their emergency key to break into my space without permission. They claimed they were just checking on me since I moved out 2 years ago, but their visits had become full-scale invasions of my privacy, complete with throwing away my belongings and completely rearranging my furniture to suit their preferences. I stood in my doorway watching my 62-year-old mother organize my spice rack according to some system that made sense only to her, while my father casually flipped through bank statements that had arrived in today's mail delivery. The scene felt surreal, like walking into someone else's life where basic boundaries simply didn't exist. "Mom, Dad, what are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm despite the anger building in my chest. Helen turned around with that bright smile she always wore when caught doing something inappropriate. "Oh, Tommy, perfect timing. I was just fixing your kitchen organization. You had paprika next to vanilla extract, which makes absolutely no sense from a cooking perspective." Richard looked up from my credit card statement with a disapproving frown. "Son, you're spending way too much money on takeout. $43 at that Thai place last week. Your mother could make the same meal for $8. I took a deep breath, remembering the conversation we'd had just 2 weeks earlier about respecting my privacy. "We talked about this. You can't just come into my apartment whenever you feel like it. I'm 28 years old. A mother never stops worrying," Helen replied, dismissing my concerns with a wave of her hand. "Besides, this place was a complete disaster when we arrived. Dishes in the sink, laundry on the bedroom floor, and don't get me started on the state of your bathroom." The truth was, my apartment had been perfectly normal when I left for work that morning. A coffee mug in the sink and yesterday's jeans on the floor didn't constitute a disaster, but trying to explain normal adult living habits to my parents had become an impossible task. This intrusion wasn't an isolated incident. 6 months ago, it started with small, helpful visits that gradually transformed into something much more invasive. Helen would stop by to water plants I didn't ask her to care for, then stay to reorganize my bookshelf because my system was clearly inferior to hers. Richard would arrive to fix squeaky hinges I hadn't complained about, then spend an hour critiquing my financial choices while going through papers on my desk. My girlfriend Sarah had stopped coming over because she felt uncomfortable knowing my parents might walk in at any moment. Last month, she had been getting dressed after a shower when Helen used her key to enter unannounced, leading to an awkward encounter that left Sarah feeling violated and questioning whether our relationship had any privacy at all. The examples of their overreach had become countless and increasingly bizarre. Helen threw away my collection of vintage band t-shirts from concerts I'd attended in college, claiming they were too ratty for a professional person to own. She replaced them with polo shirts she'd purchased without asking my size or color preference. Richard completely reorganized my computer setup in my home office, moving my monitor to what he considered a more ergonomically correct position, and rearranging my cables according to his plumbing-influenced sense of organization. Both parents regularly went through my personal documents, questioning everything from my grocery spending to my choice of internet provider. Helen had called my car insurance company to inquire about my coverage, while Richard contacted my internet service provider to complain about the speed I was paying for claiming I was being overcharged for features I didn't need. My background made their behavior even more frustrating. As a software developer at a growing tech startup, I solved complex problems daily and managed significant responsibilities. I had moved out specifically to establish adult autonomy after living at home through college and my first job. The independence I had worked so hard to achieve was being systematically dismantled by people who claimed to love me. Helen was a retired elementary school teacher who had dedicated 35 years to nurturing children, but she seemed incapable of recognizing that her own child had grown into an adult capable of making his own decisions. Her empty nest syndrome had evolved into something more controlling, as if managing my life could fill the void left by retirement. Richard owned a small but successful plumbing business that he'd built from nothing, instilling in him a belief that constant oversight was necessary for success. He applied the same management style he used with his employees to his relationship with me, offering unsolicited advice and corrections, as if I were a junior plumber who needed guidance on every task. Today, I decided to try a different approach. I pulled out my phone and showed them a detailed list I'd been keeping of their unauthorized visits over the past 6 months. 23 separate incidents ranging from brief inspections to full-scale cleaning marathons that left my apartment unrecognizable. "Look at this," I said, scrolling through dates and descriptions. March 15th, you threw away my coffee table books and replaced them with magazines about home improvement. March 22nd, you rearranged my entire closet and donated clothes to charity without asking. April 3rd, you installed a new shower head because you didn't like my water pressure. Helen's face crumpled into the expression she wore whenever anyone questioned her maternal instincts. "We're only trying to help you, sweetie. You work such long hours and this place needs attention, you can't give it." Richard stood up, his defensive posture indicating that reason wasn't going to prevail. "You're being ungrateful, Tom. We raised you better than this. When I was your age, I would have been thankful if my parents cared enough to help me maintain a decent living space." "Help!" I repeated, feeling my frustration boiling over. "Help would be asking first. Help would be respecting my decisions about my own space. This isn't help, it's control." The guilt tactics began immediately. Helen's eyes filled with tears as she explained how much she missed taking care of me, how empty the house felt without children to nurture, and how worried she was that I wasn't eating properly or maintaining healthy habits. Her emotional manipulation was expert-level, honed through decades of managing classroom behavior and refined through years of parenting. Richard's approach was more direct, but equally manipulative. He accused me of selfishness, claiming that family members should support each other, and that my desire for independence was really just an excuse to avoid responsibility. He painted my request for boundaries as a rejection of family values, and suggested that outside influences were turning me against my own parents. I pleaded with them to understand that I wasn't rejecting their love, just their methods. I explained that healthy relationships require mutual respect, and that their constant presence was affecting my mental health and my romantic relationship. I offered compromises, scheduled visits, family dinners, regular phone calls, anything that would give me some control over my own space. As we argued in circles with my parents becoming more defensive and emotional, Helen reached into her purse and pulled out something that made my blood run cold. A key ring with 3 identical keys, each clearly labeled with my apartment number. "I had extras made," she admitted, her voice small but defiant. "The locksmith said it was smart to have backups for family emergencies." I stared at the keys, realizing that my situation was far worse than I had imagined. "Extras? I asked for the emergency key back last month." "Well, yes, but what if something really happened to you?" Helen's voice grew stronger as she justified her actions. "What if you had an accident or got sick and we couldn't get in to help?" Richard nodded in agreement. "We gave one to your Aunt Patricia and one to Jennifer. Family should look out for each other." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not only had my parents been systematically invading my privacy, but they had distributed keys to my apartment to other family members without my knowledge or consent. The scope of their betrayal was staggering, and I realized that what I had thought was overprotective parenting was actually a coordinated family effort to maintain control over my adult life. The shock of discovering multiple family members had unauthorized access to my apartment left me speechless for several moments. I stared at the keyring in Helen's hand, trying to process the implications of what she had just revealed. "Who else has been coming into my apartment?" I demanded, my voice cracking slightly. Helen exchanged a nervous glance with Richard before answering reluctantly. Just Patricia and Jennifer. Their family, Tommy. They care about you too. My Aunt Patricia was Helen's younger sister, a 55-year-old real estate agent with strong opinions about proper home maintenance and lifestyle choices. My sister Jennifer, 3 years older than me and married with 2 children, had always been the family golden child who never challenged our parents' authority. I immediately pulled out my phone and opened the security app I had recently installed, partly because of weird feelings about my apartment's security. The motion detection logs revealed a disturbing pattern that made my stomach churn. Patricia's visits appeared twice weekly during my work hours, perfectly timed for when she knew I wouldn't be home. Jennifer's entries were logged for weekend mornings times when I typically went running or ran errands. The systematic nature of their schedules indicated this wasn't casual family concern, but organized surveillance. I called Patricia, first my hands shaking as I dialed her number. She answered on the second ring with her characteristic, cheerful real estate agent voice. "Patricia, have you been going into my apartment?" I asked directly, not bothering with pleasantries. There was a pause before she answered, her tone becoming defensive. "Your mother asked me to check on the place occasionally. She was worried about you living alone for the first time." "I've been living alone for 2 years." "Well, yes, but you know how Helen worries. I just take a few photos to show her everything's okay." Photos. My aunt had been documenting my living space and reporting back to my mother like some kind of domestic intelligence operation. I felt sick thinking about strangers analyzing pictures of my personal belongings and making judgments about my lifestyle. I hung up and immediately called Jennifer, who answered while clearly dealing with her children in the background. "Jenny, we need to talk about you having a key to my apartment." "Oh, that." Her tone was dismissive, as if my privacy was a minor inconvenience. "Mom asked me to keep an eye on things when I'm in your neighborhood. I just check your mail and make sure you're eating actual food instead of living on pizza and energy drinks. You've been going through my mail and my kitchen. Someone has to make sure you're taking care of yourself. You always were helpless with practical things." The casual way she dismissed my autonomy was infuriating, but I pressed for more information. Through questioning both women, I discovered the existence of a group chat called Tom Watch, where my extended family shared updates about my apartment condition, dating life, and daily habits. Patricia admitted she regularly photographed the contents of my refrigerator and medicine cabinet, then shared these images with Helen, along with commentary about my food choices and health habits. She had taken inventory of my cleaning supplies, personal care products, and even counted the books on my shelves to assess whether I was maintaining intellectual growth. Jennifer confessed to monitoring my mail for anything she deemed concerning, including credit card statements, medical correspondence, and subscription renewals. She had been intercepting packages when she thought the contents might be inappropriate or wasteful, then reporting these purchases to Helen for family discussions about my spending habits. The group chat included not just my immediate family, but also my cousin Derek, my uncle Paul, and even my maternal grandmother. They treated me like an incompetent child who needed constant supervision, sharing photos, observations, and concerns as if I were a troubled teenager rather than an adult with a successful career and independent life. When I confronted my family members individually, each one defended their actions as necessary and loving. Derek claimed he had been keeping an eye on my social media accounts to make sure I wasn't posting anything that might hurt my professional reputation. Uncle Paul admitted he had driven by my apartment building several times to check on the neighborhood safety, and had even spoken to my neighbors about my habits and schedule. My grandmother, the most shocking participant, revealed that she had been receiving weekly reports about my well-being and had been encouraging the family's involvement because she worried I was becoming too isolated from family values. Sarah confirmed that she had noticed unfamiliar older adults in my building and had even seen people using keys to enter, which explained her growing discomfort with spending time at my place. She admitted that the constant possibility of family intrusion had made her feel like our relationship was being monitored, and judged by people who barely knew her. My friends had also noticed the surveillance, though they hadn't understood what they were seeing. My college roommate Jake mentioned seeing older adults entering my building and assuming I still lived with family. My coworker Lisa said she had seen a woman photographing the building directory, which now made sense in the context of Patricia's reconnaissance missions. The realization that my entire extended family viewed me as incompetent and in need of management was devastating. I began questioning my decision-making abilities, wondering if their constant criticism and oversight had been justified. The psychological impact of having my independence constantly undermined was affecting my confidence in ways I was just beginning to understand. I noticed how the surveillance had changed my behavior in my own home. I found myself cleaning obsessively before leaving for work, hiding personal items that might be judged, and feeling anxious about normal adult choices, like what to eat or how to organize my space. The constant knowledge that family members might be observing and reporting on my life had made me a prisoner in my own apartment. During my investigation into the family network, I made an appointment to speak with Jennifer face-to-face, hoping to understand how my sister had justified such extreme violations of my privacy. We met at a coffee shop near her house, where she brought her laptop to show me something that would change everything. "Look, Tom, we're not trying to control you," she said, opening her computer. "We're just documenting that you're okay." What I saw on her screen made my blood run cold. Jennifer had created a comprehensive digital file about my private life, complete with folders organized by category: finances, health, social life, work, and daily habits. She had been systematically photographing my personal documents, including bank statements, credit card bills, work emails I had printed at home, medical appointment cards, and even personal letters. The financial folder contained images of every piece of mail related to my money management, with Jennifer's handwritten notes analyzing my spending patterns and flagging what she considered problematic purchases. The health folder included photos of prescription bottles, over-the-counter medications, and even the contents of my bathroom trash can to monitor my personal care habits. Most disturbing was the work folder, which contained photographs of confidential company documents I had brought home, including internal emails, project specifications, and strategic planning materials that my employer would never authorize family members to access. Jennifer explained matter-of-factly that she had been sharing this information with Helen, who had been using these detailed reports to make unsolicited decisions about my life. The scope of their information gathering was staggering and potentially illegal, representing a level of surveillance that went far beyond family concern into the realm of stalking and harassment. The discovery of Jennifer's surveillance files prompted me to investigate how far my family's interference had extended beyond my apartment. I started with my workplace calling our HR department to ask if they had received any unusual communications about me. Marcus Rodriguez, my manager at the software development company, awkwardly admitted during a private conversation that Helen had contacted him 3 times in the past month. She had expressed concern about what she called my rebellious phase and requested that they monitor my work performance for signs of instability. "I didn't know how to handle it," Marcus explained, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "She seemed genuinely worried about your mental health, but the calls felt inappropriate. We've been wondering about your family situation and whether it might affect your work." The embarrassment was overwhelming. My professional reputation, which I had carefully built over 3 years with the company, was being undermined by my mother's interference. Marcus revealed that the management team had discussed my family situation during several meetings, questioning whether the instability might impact my ability to handle increased responsibilities. I decided to contact other institutions that might have received similar calls. My doctor's office confirmed that Helen had contacted them twice, claiming to be worried about my mental health because I was isolating myself from family and making irrational decisions about independence. The medical receptionist had been confused by the calls because my file showed no history of mental health concerns, and all my interactions had been completely normal. My bank's customer service department had a record of Helen calling to inquire about what she described as unusual spending patterns on independence-related purchases. She had questioned why I was spending money on things like premium cable services, restaurant meals, and entertainment subscriptions, suggesting these expenses indicated poor judgment and possible mental health issues. Most shockingly, Helen had contacted my apartment management company multiple times to express concerns about my lifestyle. She had complained about what she called concerning visitors, specifically referencing Sarah, and had requested that building management monitor my apartment for signs of inappropriate behavior or safety issues. The apartment manager, David Chen, called me after I inquired about these communications. "Your mother seemed very worried about you," he said diplomatically. "She asked us to keep an eye on your apartment for signs of distress or dangerous behavior. We didn't act on her requests because they seemed unusual, but we documented the calls in your file. The impact on my relationship with Sarah was even more devastating than the professional consequences. When I finally convinced her to explain her recent distance, she revealed an encounter that made my family's behavior even more disturbing. 3 weeks earlier, Helen had approached Sarah at the coffee shop near my office building, somehow knowing her work schedule and daily routine. Helen had cornered her during her lunch break and engaged in what Sarah described as an interrogation disguised as a friendly conversation. She asked me about our relationship, how long we'd been dating, whether we were sexually active, and if I had noticed any concerning changes in your behavior. Sarah explained, her voice shaking with anger and embarrassment. She told me you had always been irresponsible with money and relationships, and that family members were worried about your judgment. Helen had warned Sarah that I had a history of making impulsive decisions that hurt people close to me, citing examples from high school and college that were either exaggerated or completely fabricated. She had suggested that Sarah might want to reconsider our relationship before she became too emotionally invested in someone with such obvious instability issues. The manipulation was sophisticated and cruel. Helen had used selective information and outright lies to undermine my relationship, presenting herself as a concerned mother, trying to protect a naive young woman from her son's irresponsible behavior. Sarah admitted that the conversation had planted seeds of doubt that had been growing for weeks. Back at work, the professional damage was becoming clearer. Marcus explained that Helen's calls had made the management team question my reliability and family stability. They had been hesitant to offer me the promotion I had been working toward because they were concerned that family drama might affect my work performance and the team's productivity. "We weren't sure if you were dealing with mental health issues or family problems," Marcus said. "The promotion involves managing a small team, and we need someone who can maintain professional boundaries and handle stress effectively." I realized that my family's interference was systematically destroying the adult life I had worked so hard to build. My career advancement was stalled, my relationship was strained, and my reputation was damaged by people who claimed to love me, but were actively sabotaging my success. I consulted with a lawyer to understand my legal options, learning that my parents' actions could constitute harassment, invasion of privacy, and possibly identity theft due to their unauthorized access to my mail and personal documents. The attorney explained that I had grounds for a restraining order, but pursuing legal action would likely destroy family relationships permanently. The emotional toll was becoming unbearable. I found myself questioning every decision, wondering if my family was right about my inability to manage adult responsibilities. Their constant criticism and interference had created a mental state where I doubted my own judgment and felt anxious about normal life choices. Sleep became difficult as I worried about what my family might be planning next. I started having panic attacks when I came home to find my apartment had been rearranged, or when I discovered evidence of their visits. The stress was affecting my work performance, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy that seemed to validate their concerns about my competence. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon, when I received a call that made me realize my parents were escalating their control tactics to a dangerous new level. My apartment complex security guard, Mike Thompson, called to inform me that my parents were in the building manager's office with a locksmith. "They're saying you gave them permission to change your locks for better security." Mike explained, his voice uncertain. "They have some kind of paperwork, but it seemed weird to me. Usually, tenants handle their own lock changes." I felt my heart racing as I realized what was happening. Helen and Richard had moved beyond surveillance and interference into an attempted takeover of my housing situation. They were trying to establish complete physical control over my living space, essentially making me a prisoner in my own home. "Don't let them do anything," I told Mike urgently. "I never gave permission for any lock changes. I'm coming home right now." As I rushed out of the office, ignoring my co-workers' concerned questions, I realized that my parents had been planning something much more dramatic than I had imagined. Their goal wasn't just to monitor and influence my life. They were attempting to take complete control of my independence and force me back into a childlike dependency on their authority. I arrived at my apartment building to find a scene that felt like something from a psychological thriller. Helen and Richard were in the building manager's office with David Chen, a professional locksmith, and a stack of official-looking documents spread across the desk. Through the glass office windows, I could see my mother gesturing emphatically, while my father stood with his arms crossed in his characteristic stance of stubborn determination. Outside in the parking lot, a U-Haul truck sat loaded with moving boxes and packing supplies. My cousin Derek was leaning against it, smoking a cigarette, and checking his phone, clearly waiting for instructions to begin whatever operation they had planned. I walked into the building manager's office, where Helen immediately brightened with her practiced smile of maternal concern. "Oh, perfect, Tommy. We were just explaining to David about the security upgrades we discussed." David looked confused and uncomfortable, clearly caught in a situation he hadn't expected when he started his workday. "Tom, your parents have some documents here that they say give them authority to make changes to your apartment for safety reasons." Helen produced a folder containing what appeared to be legal paperwork, complete with official seals and signatures. She had prepared documents claiming that I had signed over emergency housing decisions to my parents due to what she described as stress-related cognitive issues affecting my judgment. The family lawyer helped us prepare these. Richard explained, his tone suggesting this was a reasonable and necessary intervention. "You've been showing signs of mental instability, and we can't stand by while you make decisions that could hurt you or others." I examined the documents, immediately recognizing that the signatures were forged. Helen had somehow obtained copies of my signature from bank documents or other sources, and had recreated them on legal forms that appeared to give her temporary guardianship over my housing decisions. The locksmith, an older man named Frank, who had clearly done this type of work before, seemed skeptical about the unusual situation. "Usually the tenant has to be present for lock changes," he said diplomatically. "This is kind of an unusual arrangement." Richard's response was aggressive and manipulative. "Our son is experiencing some mental health challenges that affect his decision-making ability. These documents give us the legal authority to act in his best interest when he can't make appropriate choices for himself." As I processed what was happening, more family members began arriving. Aunt Patricia walked in carrying cleaning supplies and storage boxes, while Jennifer arrived with her husband Steve to provide what she called emotional support during this difficult intervention. Even my grandparents had been enlisted for this operation. Grandmother Dorothy and Grandfather William sat in the lobby, providing a sense of family unity and moral authority to support Helen and Richard's actions. Their presence was clearly intended to make me feel guilty about resisting what they portrayed as necessary family assistance. Helen revealed that she had consulted with a family lawyer who had helped create the fraudulent documents. She claimed the temporary guardianship was legal because I was clearly unable to maintain appropriate boundaries and was experiencing mental health challenges that affected my judgment about housing and relationships. "We're not trying to hurt you, sweetie," Helen said, her voice dripping with false compassion. We're trying to save you from making mistakes that could ruin your future. Living alone obviously isn't working for you." I realized that openly fighting the situation would only make me appear unstable and validate their claims about my mental health. Instead, I decided to secretly document everything while appearing to cooperate with their intervention. I discreetly activated the voice recording app on my phone, capturing Helen's admission that she had forged documents and Richard's threats about my inability to live independently. I recorded Patricia's confession that they had been monitoring my life for my own good, and Jennifer's detailed explanation of her surveillance activities. While my family continued their intervention, I sent text messages to my lawyer and my doctor, alerting them to the fraudulent documents and requesting their immediate assistance. My attorney confirmed that the papers were completely invalid and that my parents had no legal authority over my housing decisions. Dr. Amanda Foster, my primary care physician, was shocked to learn about Helen's unauthorized contact with her office. She confirmed that she had never discussed mental health concerns with my mother, and that Helen's claims about my psychological state were completely unfounded and potentially illegal. The emotional manipulation reached a crescendo as Helen played the devastated mother role to perfection. She claimed that my desire for independence was breaking the family apart and destroying the close relationships we had always shared. She threatened to cut off all family contact if I didn't accept their help and guidance. "This isn't about control," she sobbed convincingly. "This is about love. When you love someone, you don't just stand by and watch them destroy their life. We're your family, Tommy. We know what's best for you better than some strangers or a girlfriend who doesn't understand our family dynamics." Richard became increasingly aggressive as I questioned their authority, claiming that I was being brainwashed by outsiders who didn't understand family loyalty and responsibility. He accused Sarah of influencing me against my family and suggested that my friends were encouraging destructive behavior because they were jealous of our close family bonds. Instead of fighting their narrative directly, I made a strategic decision that would shock them and prove my competence once and for all. I pretended to accept their intervention while secretly planning a complete escape that would demonstrate my independence and expose their manipulation to the entire family. "You're right," I said, allowing my voice to sound defeated and grateful. "I guess I wasn't ready for this much independence. Maybe I do need more family support while I figure things out." Helen's face lit up with triumph, while Richard nodded approvingly at what he saw as my return to sensible thinking. They interpreted my compliance as validation of their concerns and proof that their intervention was necessary and successful. As my family finished their preparations for what they clearly saw as my rescue, Helen revealed the ultimate goal of their operation. She had already contacted my landlord to discuss terminating my lease and had been researching more appropriate living situations closer to home, where they could provide proper supervision and support. "We've prepared your old room at home," she announced proudly. "Nothing's changed since you moved out. All your childhood things are still there, and I've even bought new sheets and towels. You can stay with us temporarily while we find you a nice place in our neighborhood where family can be more involved in your daily life." The plan was complete domination, disguised as loving care. They intended to move me back into my childhood bedroom, terminate my independence entirely, and establish permanent oversight of my adult life. Helen had been planning this forced regression for weeks, waiting for the right opportunity to execute what she saw as a necessary intervention. Over the next 3 days, I played the role of a grateful son who had finally seen the wisdom of his family's guidance. I thanked Helen and Richard for opening my eyes to my obvious inability to handle independence and expressed relief that they had intervened before I made even worse decisions. "You were right about everything," I told them during a family dinner at their house. "I wasn't ready for this much responsibility. Living alone has been harder than I wanted to admit. My performance was convincing because I drew on genuine emotions of exhaustion and frustration, reframing them as gratitude for family intervention rather than anger about their manipulation." Helen beamed with satisfaction, while Richard nodded approvingly at what he saw as my return to appropriate family values. While my family celebrated their successful intervention, I was secretly implementing the most comprehensive escape plan of my adult life. Using my work computer and my friend Jake's address for all communications, I arranged a new apartment across town in a secure building with controlled access and professional management. The new place represented everything my parents disapproved of: a modern downtown loft with contemporary design premium amenities and an explicit focus on independent living. The building featured a 24-hour doorman security cameras and strict visitor policies that would make unauthorized access impossible. I opened a new bank account at a different financial institution using my work address for all correspondence. I transferred my savings to the new account and set up automatic payments for all my bills, ensuring complete financial separation from any accounts my parents might have information about. Password security became a priority as I changed every login credential for email, social media, work systems, and personal accounts. I enabled two-factor authentication on everything and updated all security questions with answers my family couldn't guess, based on their extensive knowledge of my personal history. My employer was surprisingly supportive when I explained the need to work remotely for 1 week during my transition. Marcus agreed to the arrangement after I assured him that the family situation was being resolved and wouldn't affect my long-term work performance. I arranged mail forwarding to a P.O. box across town, ensuring that my family couldn't monitor my correspondence or use postal mail to track my new location. I also updated my address with all service providers, financial institutions, and subscription services. The hardest part of the preparation was rebuilding my relationship with Sarah, who had been understandably skeptical about my ability to establish real boundaries with my family. I explained my escape strategy in detail, asking for her support while acknowledging that her trust needed to be earned through actions rather than promises. "I know this sounds crazy," I told her during a long conversation at her apartment. "But I think the only way to shock them into respecting boundaries is to prove I can live independently without their knowledge or assistance." Sarah was initially hesitant, worried that my plan was too extreme and might permanently damage family relationships. However, when she fully understood the extent of my family's surveillance and manipulation, she became completely committed to helping me establish real independence. I also enlisted support from my college roommate, Jake, who had observed my family's controlling behavior during our university years and had always encouraged me to establish stronger boundaries. Jake eagerly agreed to help coordinate the secret move, excited to support what he saw as a long overdue stand for personal autonomy. My cousin Brian, who was 2 years younger and had always felt smothered by our extended family's involvement in his life, became an invaluable ally. He provided inside information about family plans and helped me understand the full scope of their surveillance network. Brian revealed that he had also been subjected to similar monitoring and interference, though not to the extent I had experienced. He credited my courage with inspiring him to start setting his own boundaries with family members who treated adult children like teenagers in need of constant supervision. The psychological preparation was as important as the logistical planning. I attended 3 sessions with Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a therapist who specialized in family boundary issues and emotional manipulation. She helped me process the extent of the psychological abuse I had experienced and develop strategies for maintaining boundaries after establishing independence. Dr. Martinez confirmed that my family's behavior constituted a form of psychological abuse that was designed to maintain dependence and control. She helped me understand that their actions weren't motivated by love, but by their own emotional needs and fears about losing influence over my life. "Healthy families support independence," she explained. "What you're describing is a pattern of control and manipulation designed to keep you dependent on their approval and guidance." Your plan to establish complete independence is a reasonable response to unreasonable behavior. The financial preparation required careful planning to ensure I could maintain complete independence without any family assistance. I calculated all my monthly expenses, built an emergency fund equivalent to 6 months of living costs, and arranged automatic payments for utilities, insurance, and other essential services. I created a decoy plan to maintain the illusion that I was cooperating with my family's housing intervention. I found a fake apartment listing in their preferred neighborhood and told them I was excited about a compromise location where they could visit regularly and be more involved in my daily life. We scheduled a fake apartment viewing for Saturday morning at 10 o'clock, which would be exactly when I executed my real move to the secure downtown location. Professional movers were arranged, utilities were scheduled for connection, and my new apartment was fully prepared for immediate occupancy. My support network was coordinated like a military operation. Sarah would oversee the packing of personal items and coordinate with the moving company. Jake would handle the logistics of transferring my belongings from my parents' house to the new location. Brian would provide intelligence about family movements and ensure they remained focused on the fake apartment viewing. On Friday evening, as I prepared for the most dramatic day of my adult life, I overheard a phone conversation that confirmed how extreme my family's control intentions had become. Helen was speaking with someone she called a family consultant about establishing permanent oversight of my life decisions. I listened from the kitchen as Helen discussed hiring a private investigator to monitor my adjustment and ensure I didn't make any more poor decisions about independence. She was researching legal ways to establish ongoing authority over my financial decisions, living arrangements, and even my romantic relationships. "We can't let this happen again," Helen told her consultant. "If we don't establish proper boundaries now, he'll just make the same mistakes over and over. Sometimes children need to be protected from their own poor judgment even when they're adults." The conversation revealed that my family's control attempts would never end unless I took action dramatic enough to completely sever their ability to interfere in my adult life. Their goal wasn't temporary assistance, but permanent authority over my personal decisions. Saturday morning arrived with perfect weather for the most important day of my adult life. I woke up early and sent my parents a text expressing excitement about the apartment viewing and confirming that I would meet them at the fake address at 10 o'clock. While Helen and Richard drove across town to look at a non-existent apartment, my carefully coordinated team executed the move with precision that would have impressed a military logistics officer. Jake arrived at my parents' house at 8:30, while Sarah coordinated with the professional moving company at my secret new location. The moving crew, led by an experienced foreman named Carlos, had been briefed on the unusual situation and worked with remarkable efficiency. They understood that time was critical and that discretion was essential for the operation's success. By 9:15, all my belongings were loaded and en route to my new downtown loft. Brian confirmed via text that our parents were still driving toward the fake address, completely unaware that their son was simultaneously establishing complete independence 30 miles away. My new apartment building was everything I had hoped for in terms of security and professional management. The doorman James was a retired police officer who took building security seriously and had been briefed on my family situation by the building management company. "Don't worry about unauthorized visitors," James assured me as I signed the final paperwork. "We have strict policies about access, and no one gets upstairs without tenant approval regardless of what they claim about family relationships." The apartment itself represented a complete transformation from the life my family had been trying to control. Modern appliances, contemporary furniture, downtown city views, and sophisticated amenities that reflected my actual tastes rather than my parents' preferences for traditional suburban living. Sarah arrived with champagne and takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant, the same place my father had criticized for being overpriced. We toasted my independence while setting up my home office with the computer configuration I preferred, rather than Richard's ergonomically incorrect modifications. At exactly 10:15, my phone began exploding with calls and text messages. Helen and Richard had discovered that the apartment address didn't exist and had rushed back home to find my belongings missing from their house. The first call was from Helen, her voice hysterical with panic and confusion. "Tommy, where are you? Your room is empty and there's no apartment at the address you gave us. What's happening?" I let the call go to voicemail, focusing instead on arranging furniture in my new living room, while Sarah organized my kitchen according to my preferences, rather than Helen's organizational system. Richard's voicemails were angrier and more demanding. "Tom, this is ridiculous. Call us back immediately and tell us where you are. Your mother is worried sick, and this kind of behavior is exactly why you need family supervision." Instead of answering their increasingly frantic calls, I composed a carefully crafted group text message to the entire extended family, including everyone who had participated in the surveillance network. The message included photos of my new apartment setup and a clear explanation of my actions. "I've moved to a new apartment where I can live independently without unauthorized family interference. The past months of surveillance manipulation and control have been unacceptable. I'm not rejecting family relationships, but I am establishing non-negotiable boundaries about privacy and respect." I attached documentation of their harassment activities, photos of the forged legal documents, screenshots from the Tom Watch group chat that Brian had provided, and copies of my security camera footage showing unauthorized apartment entries. The family response was immediate and divided. Patricia and Jennifer supported Helen's position that I was being ungrateful and potentially dangerous, expressing concern about my mental state, and suggesting that my actions proved their surveillance had been necessary and justified. However, Brian and several younger cousins expressed support for my independence. My cousin Sarah, who was finishing college and had been subjected to similar family oversight, sent a private message congratulating me on my courage and asking for advice about establishing her own boundaries. Most surprisingly, my grandparents called within an hour to express shock about the surveillance activities. Grandmother Dorothy admitted she had been receiving reports about my well-being, but had never understood the extent of the monitoring and manipulation. "I thought your mother was just keeping in touch with your life," Grandmother said during our phone conversation. "I had no idea about the keys and the photographing and all that business. That doesn't sound like normal family concern to me." My employer's response was equally validating. Marcus called Saturday afternoon to congratulate me on resolving the family situation and to officially offer me the promotion that had been delayed due to concerns about family interference affecting my work performance. "I'm impressed by how you handled a difficult situation," Marcus said. "The leadership team has been discussing your problem-solving skills and your ability to manage complex challenges. We'd like to offer you the senior developer position with a 15% salary increase." Sarah's reaction was the most important validation of my decision. She admitted that she had been close to ending our relationship because of my family's constant interference and manipulation, but seeing my courage in establishing boundaries had convinced her that we could build a real future together. "I'm proud of you," she said, while we arranged books on my new shelves. "I was starting to wonder if you would ever be able to stand up to them. This shows me that you're serious about being an independent adult who can make his own decisions about our relationship." The legal protection I had arranged was also falling into place. My attorney had filed formal cease and desist orders against all family members who had participated in the surveillance activities, establishing legal boundaries around harassment, unauthorized contact with my employers or medical providers, and trespassing on my property. The lawyer also helped me understand my rights regarding future family interference, explaining that the documented evidence of their behavior would support restraining orders if they continued their controlling activities. As evening approached, I felt a sense of peace and accomplishment that I hadn't experienced in months. My new apartment felt truly private and secure. My relationship with Sarah was stronger than ever, and my professional life was advancing without family interference. However, the sense of triumph was interrupted by a call from James, the building doorman at 8:30 that evening. Helen and Richard had arrived at my building and were in the lobby demanding access to my apartment. "They're claiming you're mentally ill and in danger," James reported. "Your mother is pretty upset, and your father is threatening to call the police if we don't let them upstairs. They're saying they have legal authority to check on your welfare." I asked James to activate the building's security cameras and document everything that happened in the lobby. I wanted a complete record of their behavior to add to my growing collection of evidence about their inappropriate conduct. When James denied their access due to building policies about unauthorized visitors, Helen created a scene that perfectly demonstrated why I had needed to establish such dramatic boundaries. She sobbed loudly about her son being in danger, while Richard became increasingly aggressive with the building staff. "This is exactly the kind of unstable behavior that proves he needs family supervision," Richard shouted at James. "You're putting a mentally ill person at risk by not letting his family help him." Helen's performance included claims that I had a history of mental health problems and that my desire for independence was actually a symptom of psychological illness that required family intervention. She demanded that building management call emergency services to perform a welfare check on their disturbed son. The security footage captured their erratic and inappropriate behavior perfectly, providing me with undeniable evidence that their concern wasn't loving or reasonable, but controlling and manipulative. Their willingness to lie to building security and threaten legal action demonstrated exactly why I had needed to establish such strict boundaries. James handled the situation with professional calm, explaining building policies and offering to call police if they continued to harass staff or refused to leave the premises. Eventually, Helen and Richard departed, but not before Richard threatened to find other ways to get access to check on my welfare. The security footage from my building lobby became a crucial turning point in my family's understanding of their own behavior. When James provided me with the video recording, I was shocked by how aggressive and inappropriate my parents appeared when viewed objectively. Helen's sobbing performance and claims about my mental illness looked manipulative and dishonest rather than loving and concerned. Richard's threats toward building staff and demands for special access based on fabricated mental health concerns appeared controlling and potentially illegal rather than protective and reasonable. More importantly, when my grandparents requested to see the footage to better understand what had happened, they were appalled by their children's behavior. Grandmother Dorothy called Helen immediately after viewing the video to express her disapproval and concern. "I raised you better than that, Helen," she told her daughter during a conversation I was later informed about. "That's not how decent people behave. Lying about mental illness and threatening building staff is not normal parental concern." The professional documentation of their inappropriate behavior forced my parents to confront how their actions appeared to outsiders. The security guard's incident report described their conduct as aggressive, manipulative, and concerning language that shocked them into recognizing how far their behavior had deviated from normal family relationships. Within a week, my grandparents arranged a family meeting at their house, insisting that all parties attend to address what Grandfather William called a serious family problem that needs immediate resolution. The formal intervention by the family's eldest members carried weight that my individual protests had never achieved. I arrived at the meeting with a comprehensive presentation of evidence documenting months of harassment and manipulation. The security footage forged legal documents, surveillance photographs, and recorded conversations painted a clear picture of systematic abuse, disguised as family concern. Helen broke down completely when confronted with the full scope of her actions. Seeing the Tom Watch group chat messages displayed on my laptop screen made her realize how her behavior looked to others and how far she had strayed from appropriate maternal concern. "I never meant for it to become like this," she sobbed, her voice shaking with genuine remorse. "I just missed taking care of you, and I was scared that you would make mistakes without family guidance. Empty nest syndrome made me crazy, and I convinced myself that controlling your life was the same as loving you. Richard's admission was more difficult but equally important for family healing. He acknowledged that his business owner mentality had led him to treat me like an employee who needed constant management, rather than a son who deserved respect and autonomy. I built my business by controlling every detail. He explained, his voice subdued. I applied the same approach to parenting, thinking that more oversight would guarantee better outcomes. I forgot that raising successful children means teaching them to make their own decisions, not making decisions for them forever. The extended family members who had participated in the surveillance network also expressed remorse when confronted with evidence of their involvement. Patricia admitted that her real estate background had made her view my apartment as a property to be managed, rather than a home to be respected. Jennifer's apology was particularly meaningful because she acknowledged how her competitive relationship with me had influenced her willingness to participate in undermining my independence. She admitted that reporting my mistakes to our parents had made her feel superior and more successful by comparison. Together, we established clear boundaries for future family interactions that respected my autonomy while maintaining loving relationships. Weekly family dinners at restaurants or my grandparents' house replaced unauthorized apartment visits. Scheduled phone calls with advance notice replaced surprise check-ins and emergency interventions. Most importantly, we created a family agreement that personal information about individual members would not be shared without permission, and that romantic relationships would be respected as private matters between the adults involved. 6 months later, my promotion at work had led to additional responsibilities and recognition within the company. Marcus praised my leadership skills and recommended me for advanced training programs that would accelerate my career development. My professional reputation had been completely restored and was stronger than ever. Sarah and I decided to move in together after a year of successful independent living, and my parents attended our housewarming party as respectful guests rather than invasive overseers. Helen even apologized to Sarah privately for their previous inappropriate encounter and welcomed her into the family properly. The Tom Watch group chat was permanently deleted, and family members learned to respect each other's privacy and adult decision-making. Brian used my example to establish his own boundaries with family interference, and several younger cousins expressed gratitude for the precedent I had set for independent living. My relationship with my parents evolved into something healthier and more sustainable. Helen channeled her nurturing energy into volunteering with children's literacy programs, finding fulfillment in helping others rather than controlling my life. Richard learned to offer advice only when asked and to respect my decisions, even when he disagreed with them. Personal growth from the experience extended far beyond family relationships. I developed confidence in my decision-making abilities and learned to trust my instincts about what was healthy and appropriate in relationships. The experience taught me that loving someone sometimes requires risking short-term conflict to establish long-term respect. Most importantly, I learned that true independence isn't about physical separation from family, but about establishing mutual respect and healthy boundaries that allow relationships to flourish based on choice rather than obligation or control. The situation also taught me about the difference between love and control. People who truly love you want you to succeed and become the best version of yourself, even if that means making choices they wouldn't make. Control disguised as love actually prevents growth and damages the very relationships it claims to protect. I realized that enabling unhealthy behavior isn't actually helpful to anyone involved. By refusing to accept my family's controlling behavior, I forced them to confront their own issues and develop healthier ways of expressing love and concern. Sometimes protecting your autonomy is an act of love toward both yourself and the people who care about you. The experience fundamentally changed my understanding of healthy relationships. The most meaningful connections in life are those where people choose to be together based on mutual respect and genuine affection, rather than feeling trapped by obligation or manipulation. Today, I live in genuine contentment in my secure apartment, thriving in my career, enjoying a strong relationship with Sarah, and maintaining loving but respectful connections with my family. The courage required to establish boundaries created space for real love to flourish, proving that sometimes you have to risk losing someone temporarily to save the relationship permanently. The deepest lesson from this experience is that independence and family love aren't opposing forces, but complementary aspects of healthy adult relationships. When family members respect each other's autonomy and decision-making abilities, they create an environment where love can be expressed freely rather than demanded through control and manipulation. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who meant well but crossed important lines? How did you balance maintaining relationships while protecting your independence? Share your experiences in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video if it resonated with your own struggles for adult autonomy. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges and building healthier relationships, and share this with anyone who might be dealing with similar boundary issues. Remember that protecting your independence isn't selfish, but necessary for building the kind of relationships that truly support your growth and happiness.